It's now 6 o'clock sharp, so I think we can start our meeting. Let's make sure that all our mic are switched off. Also, let's make sure our cameras are switched off. Thank you for that. So on this tutorial, we are going to learn the dynamic part of web. Also, we are going to learn how to post our forms. Also, we are going to learn the basic of web development, the basic of web programming. Like why do we need CSS? Why do we need PHP? Why do we need JavaScript? Why do we need HTML? So in web programming, you are not going to use just one single language. You see that you are going to have many of them, but they actually work together. So you've got CSS for styling, you've got the HTML for the structure of the website, and you've got the PHP as the server-side scripting language for interacting with the database, as well as the JavaScript for handling events, also for the responsive of the website. So for it to be easy for you, you need to understand all those things. Why do you need CSS? Why do you need JavaScript? Why do you need PHP? Why do you need HTML? It's very important to know all those things. So let's talk about the dynamic content versus the static website. So there are two types of web pages, which is the static and the dynamic web page. So a static site provides hyperlinked text and perhaps a login screen, but beyond that, it doesn't require additional participation for the user. So it's just a static website. Nothing changes there. You just log in and then you just read on the website. You cannot modify it or do anything on it. So in other words, dynamic means that the user interacts more with the website beyond just reading pages, and the website responds accordingly. So this is why you are learning the PHP. This is why you are learning JavaScript, so that instead of just creating static websites, you can also be able to create dynamic web sites. So 3 components are required for creating and running dynamic web pages. So you need a web server, a server-side programming language, and a database. So you need all those 3 things. You need a web server, a server-side programming language, and a database. I think you noticed that with HTML, you can just create an HTML file, and then you can just run it direct on your web browser. But with the PHP file, you need a server. You cannot run a PHP file just direct on your browser. You need a server. Like on your local machine, you can install WAMP or SAMP server. You can install WAMP or SAMP server. Then you'll be able to run the PHP code. So let's talk about PHP and MySQL. Why do we need PHP and MySQL in our websites? So PHP and MySQL make creating dynamic websites simpler, easier, and faster. So PHP is a programming language, also we call it scripting language, designed to generate web pages interactively on the computer, saving them. Called a web server. So a PHP code runs between the requested page and the web server, adding to and changing the basic HTML output. So on your static website, we'll be actually changing that content on that site by by requesting some information from the what? From the server or from the database, and then we use the PHP to extract that information, and then we put it into our basic HTML elements. So while PHP is great for developing web functionality, it is not a database. So we need a database. So the database of choice for PHP developers is MySQL, which acts like a filing for PHP processed user information. So what are the advantages of using PHP with MySQL rather than using other databases? So MySQL is easily accessed from PHP, and they are commonly used together as they work well hand in hand and run on various computer types and operating systems, including macOS, Windows, Windows-based PCs, and Linux. So PHP and MySQL work well together. PHP and MySQL have been developed with each other in mind, so they are easy to use together. So the programming interface between them are logically paired up. Working together wasn't an afterthought when the developers created the PHP and MySQL interface. So when developers actually created the PHP and MySQL, they were actually having that thought that they are going to work together. So it's actually much easier to use PHP and MySQL. So PHP and MySQL have open source power. As they are both open source projects, PHP and MySQL can both be used for free. So that's why it is also an advantage for using PHP and MySQL. They are all free softwares, free languages. So advanced users have the ability to make changes to the source code and therefore change the way the language and the programs work if you can both their open source projects. So PHP and MySQL have community support. If you've got any error, you can actually Google it online. They've got so many support. You can actually be able to easily debug your project. So there are active communities on the web in which you can participate, and they are all, and they will answer your questions. So you can also purchase professional support for MySQL if you need it. So PHP and MySQL are fast as well. So their simplicity and efficiency design enables faster processing. I just want to add someone here. So PHP and MySQL don't bog you down with unnecessary details. So the components of a dynamic web application. What do we need for a dynamic web application? We now understand that there are three main components to creating dynamic web pages, which is a web server, a server-side programming language, and the database. So in this course, you are going to use the Apache web server, which will be on WAMP or on a SAMP, right? Also, PHP is your server-side. PHP is your server-side programming language, and MySQL is what? Is your database. So these are things that which we are going to use. We are going to use. Can we make sure that we all mute ourselves? Thank you. We are saying we are going to use three. We are going to use the Apache web server, three components, the Apache web server, PHP is your server-side programming language, and the MySQL is your database. And then for the layout of the website, we're going to use the HTML, and then we are going to use as well CSS for styling, as well as JavaScript for the responsive part. So you need to download and install these three either as one suite or separately. So you can actually install the Apache web server. You can also install the MySQL as well as the PHP, but you can just do it by install the WAMP server or the XAMPP server. Once you install that, you actually have the MySQL, the PHP, as well as the Apache web server. So we just install WAMP or SAMP. So first, Apache needs to be installed and operational before PHP and MySQL can be installed, or else they won't work correctly. So you need to install the Apache server first. Now our pages can potentially have information come from the HTML files that reference CSS, PHP templates, and a MySQL database all at once. So what you need first is the Apache server, and then you install the PHP and the MySQL. So by just installing WAMP or SAMP, you'll be having everything. And then after that, you can actually create some PHP templates that we can link with the CSS, with the JavaScript, with HTML, as well as the MySQL database. So if you want to request data from from a web page, how all of these pieces integrate together can be tricky to understand. So if a web server detects a PHP code, it determines whether the file is a PHP file, and if so, turn over the processing of the PHP to the PHP interpreter without any additional participation by the web browser, right? So, but if you include an external CSS file, your browser issues a separate request for that file before viewing the page. This will be the process for running your website. So if it is a PHP template, then the interpreter which you'll be going to use is the PHP interpreter. So if it is linked with an external CSS file, then it will actually import, the browser will actually import that CSS file before executing it so that it will reference to that CSS file. So let's talk about the PHP interpretation of the server. So this is just the basic information so that you understand why do we need PHP in our code. Why do we need the HTML? Why do we need the CSS? Why do we need the JavaScript? So this processing of the PHP on the server is called server-side processing. We call it server-side processing. When you request a web page, you trigger a whole chain of events as shown below. Maybe this is your computer, then you pass this request or this URL. You want to access the www.phone.com, then you want the file direct.html. So this is your computer here, right? So you pass a request here, this request, and then this request will be actually forwarded to the web host or to the server. So the web server there, that's where your PHP will be lying here at this process 3, and then your PHP will interact with the hard disk or with the database, and then after taking out with the hard disk, boss, we want this file. So this hard disk will give us the file that we need. Then it will go back as the response here, and then it will be shown on your screen. So this is the process. When you are Googling things on the internet, this is the process that will be actually be doing. You pass a request, then it will be forwarded to the server, and then the web server will actually retrieve that information that you want from the hard disk, and then it will be passed back as the response to your computer. So the process are as follows. You enter a web page address in your browser's location bar. So your browser breaks apart the address and sends the name of the page to the web server. For example, if you pass this, so would request the page directory.html from this domain. So we a program on the web server called the web server process takes the request for directory.html and looks for this specific file. So the web server reads the directory.html file from the web server's hard drive, and then the web server returns the contents of the directory.html to your browser. So your web browser used the HTML markup that was retained from the web server to build the rendition of the web page on your computer screen. So the HTML file called directory.html requested in here is called a static web page. It is a static because everyone who requested the directory.html page gets exactly the same page. So the PHP interpreter, MySQL, and the web server cooperating to return the page. Here, for the web server to customize the returned page, PHP and MySQL are added to the mix as illustrated. So instead of just taking this file only, we can actually use PHP and MySQL to modify the contents of this so that you can return the specific details or the specific file for a certain user, right? So for example, if you call the login.php file on your computer, here we send the request, then the request will go over the internet to your web server. And then from the web server, here, we retrieve it from the hard drive and then to the web server. And then we have got the PHP interpreter here. So this PHP interpreter will communicate with the MySQL to check if your details are correct or not. So it will actually retrieve the information from this database. You retrieve some of the information from the hard disk, and then the PHP interpreter will check if the details in this MySQL will actually match with the data that you've actually passed in here. And then from there, after that check, this one will give the data back. Maybe you'll be actually given your input, you have actually successfully logged in or so, something like that, or the home file, so that you'll be at the dashboard, something like that. And then that response will be forwarded back to your computer. So this will be the process whenever we have got what the PHP with and the MySQL, so that we can have the dynamic website. So these are the steps that we'll be actually following. All these are the steps that we'll be following. So coding with the PHP. Once PHP, MySQL, and Apache are installed, you are ready to begin your coding. I think earlier I said that if you just try to run the PHP code without the Apache server, you are going to run into a problem. You need the Apache server for you to run the PHP code. So escaping to PHP, how do you escape to PHP code? Maybe you are in the HTML file. So the PHP parsing engine needs a way to differentiate PHP code from other elements in the page. Can we make sure that we all mute ourselves? Okay, so the mechanism for doing so is known as escaping to PHP. So there are 4 ways to do this. So there are 4 ways to actually escape into PHP. You can actually know them all, or just know one, or the one that you want to use. So there's the default tags, there are short tags, there are script tags, there are ASP style tags. So escaping to PHP using the default tags. So the default tags are perhaps those most commonly used by PHP programmers due to clarity and convenience of use. So these are the default PHP tags. So if you are in the HTML, document, or in HTML code, if you just pass these tags, this opening tag and this closing tag, anything in between will be regarded as what? As PHP code. So you just need to put this angular open bracket and then question mark and then PHP, and then you put a question mark at the end, and then you put the closing tag there. So everything in between will be what? Everything in between here will be PHP. So these tags may also be the most practical ones because the initial escape characters are followed by PHP, which explicitly makes reference to the type of code that follows. So these ones are mostly used because of this PHP word there. You will be actually knowing that I'm using PHP rather than other tags which will be silent about PHP. So this can be useful because you may be simultaneously using several technologies in the same page, such as JavaScript, server-side includes and PHP. So any ensuing PHP code, you then follow the initial escape sequence preceded by the closing escape sequence, this one. So there is the use of what? Of short tags. So the short tag style is the shortest available for escaping to PHP code. So instead of putting the PHP word here, you can just put the open and then question mark, and then you put the open the question mark and then the closing angle bracket. Anything that you put in between will be regarded as the what? As the PHP code. So short tags must be enabled in order for them to work. So there are two ways to do this. So include the enable short tags option when compiling the PHP. Enable short open tag configuration directory found within the php.in file. So you need to configure this so that all these tags can work. Also, there are script tags. Several text editors will mistakenly interpret PHP code as HTML that is viewable code, interfering with the web page development process. So to eliminate this problem, use the following escape tags, which is the script, then language, then you put PHP, and then at the end you put script tag, like what you do when you put JavaScript. But here on the language, you put PHP. And then anything that comes in here will be regarded as what? As PHP code. And then the final one is the ASP style tags. A fourth and final way to embed PHP code is through the use of ASP active server page style tags. So this way is much like the short tag way described, except that a percentage sign is used instead of the question mark. So here you'll be using the percentage sign, and then everything that comes in here will be regarded as the PHP code. So a variation of the ASP style tag that can result in a lesser degree of code clutter is available. So this variation eliminates the need to include a print statement in the enclosed PHP code. So the equal sign immediately following the ASP tag signals the PHP parser to output the value of the variable. If you just put this one, then it will print the value of the variable, like we are echoing something. So making use of the convenient tag style, we could execute the following, like this one. If you got if you set the variable recipe to something, then you can use recipe. All variables in PHP start with this sign, the current sign, which is a dollar sign. So you can just say Luke's favorite recipe is, then you put the equal sign, and then you put the variable there. So what does it do? It will take the value in this recipe variable, and then it will insert here, and then the statement will be this favorite recipe is something something. So PHP variable in data types. Let's just talk about the PHP variables in data types, and then we leave it there. We'll move on to the other slide. So PHP provides support for 6 general data types. They are integers, they are floating point numbers, they are strings, they are arrays, they are objects, and they are booleans. So you need to know them so that you can actually use them. So PHP identifiers. Let's talk about PHP identifiers. What are legal identifiers in PHP? And identifiers are just the names of the variables or functions that we use in PHP so that we can actually identify each of them. So an identifier is a general term applied to variables, functions, and various other user-defined objects. So there are several properties that PHP identifiers must abide by. So an identifier can consist of one or more characters and must begin with an alphabetical letter or an underscore. So identifiers can only consist of letters, numbers, underscores, characters, and other ASCII characters from 127 through 255. Identifiers are case sensitive. The capital letter A and the small letter a are different. So therefore, a variable named recipe is different from the variables named this recipe. So this one and this one are different because of these are the capital letter R and the small letter r. And this recipe is also different from this recipe. Identifiers can be any length. So they can be of any length. So this is advantageous as it enables a programmer to accurately describe the identifier's purpose via the identifier name. So finally, an identifier name can't be identical to any of PHP's predefined keywords. So just like in other programming languages, you cannot use the keywords as the names of your functions or of your variables. Also note that your variable will always have this current sign. Okay, but as an identifier, we say that it can start by any identifier can consist of any more characters and it must begin with an alphabetical letter. But for variables, it starts with this dollar. But for functions, it must start with any characters, any alphabetical character, any alphabetical letter. Sorry. So how to declare a variable? A variable is a named memory location that contains data that may be manipulated throughout the execution of the program. I think we all know this from C language, just the same. So a variable always begins with a dollar sign. This one. The following are all valid variables: dollar color, dollar operating system, dollar sum variable, dollar model. So a variable names follow the same naming rules as those set for identifiers. That is, a variable name can begin with either an alphabetical letter or an underscore and can consist of alphabetical letters, underscores, integers, or other ASCII characters ranging from 127 to 255. And this is the end of this presentation. So I'm going to share another presentation here. But before that, do we have any questions? If we do not, we have any questions. So let me quickly share another slide. Before that, I think let's talk about the CSS. At the end, we do the posting of forms. Before that, we do the connection of PHP and MySQL. We have to connect the PHP and the MySQL database, and then after that, we we do the forms, HTML forms, and then we will be done. For other things, you actually need to read. So we are going to talk about the CSS. Is it a hand by Innocent? Innocent?
Yes. Good evening.
Okay, you can ask if it is a question.
Are we also not doing JavaScript?
JavaScript, you are doing it. You are doing it, but I'm just trying to liaise with my time here. I don't think we can actually do Java, but you can research on your own. You can search it on your own. But what I wanted to elaborate is that why do we need the JavaScript part on our web development? Why do we need the PHP? Why do we need the CSS? Why do we need the HTML? I think if I set that ground, you can actually go on and revise and actually read on what? On JavaScript.
Okay. The other question is that if you're using PHP, is JavaScript necessary?
Yes, JavaScript is necessary. For example, if you are doing the form validation, right? There is the server side and there is the client side validation. So you need that JavaScript. You cannot actually use the PHP. Yes, it can work, but it's not ideal to use PHP to validate a form at first. Like if someone didn't actually enter the email or just entered the something which is not a number, maybe on that field you need a number. You don't need the request first sent to the server, and then the server will reply back that this input on this form must be this and this and this. I think it's more wiser to use JavaScript for the sake of traffic there, so that immediately you pinpoint your data that here we need this, here we need this, on this input box you didn't enter any value or so, something like that. Then later for any leakages, then you do the validation at the server side. Then we put that aside. There are issues of events. Maybe you want someone to click this box and then you do something. You need JavaScript there. You don't need PHP. So JavaScript is vital, is very important in web programming. We need it so that we can create something which is more interactive with the user by the use of what? Of events. I don't know if you are well answered there.
Yeah, sure. And the last one is, and so JavaScript does not do the server side; it just does the client side. Is that correct?
Not that, but we need the PHP more on the server side rather than the JavaScript. It is ideal to use the PHP as your server side programming language.
Okay. Then also PHP does not also do the client side; it just does the server side.
Yes, it's the server side scripting language. You don't need it at the client side.
All right, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Don't know if there are other questions from your colleagues. I think I can mute everyone here so that we can proceed. So I'm going to share the file for CSS. So let's talk about the cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets. So cascading style sheets, which is CSS, is a style sheet language used to describe the presentation of a document written in a markup language. So this one We use it to describe the presentation of HTML, which is the hyper text markup language. So its most common application. I need a highlighter, just wait a little bit. Okay, so its most common application is to style web pages written in HTML and XHTML, but the language can be applied to any kind of XML document, including the SVG and XUL. So CSS is used to help readers of web pages to define colors, fonts, layouts, and other aspects of document presentation. So if you want some other things to look nice, or so, maybe you want to change color, you want to change the font, the layout, you use CSS. HTML is just there for the structure of your website. If you are going to put a paragraph, if you are going to put a table, it is just going to be a table with nothing more. So you use a CSS later so that you can give it other properties, maybe it's colors, maybe it's fonts, layout, or other things. So it is designed primarily to enable the separation of your document written in HTML or similar markup languages from document presentation written in CSS. That's why you see that there are more advantages of writing separate HTML file as well as separate CSS files, rather than to put the CSS inside the HTML file. So advantages of using CSS. So the separation of document content and document presentation can improve content accessibility, provide more flexibility and control in the specification of presentation characteristics, and reduce complexity and repetition in the structural content. So CSS can also allow the same markup page to be presented in different styles for different rendering methods, such as on screen, in print, by voice, when read out by a speech-based browser or a screen reader, and on braille-based tactile devices. So CSS allows the developers to control the style and layout of multiple web pages all at once. So a web developer can define a style for each HTML element and apply it to as many web pages he or she wants. To make a global change, simply change the style and all elements in the web are updated automatically. So this is the power of separating the HTML and the CSS. Any changes that you do to your CSS file will actually affect all the linked HTML documents to that CSS file. So instead of actually visiting each and every document, changing each and every style, you can actually change it at once. So syntax of CSS. The CSS syntax is made up of 3 parts, which is a selector, which will actually maybe the ID of the HTML element or the name of the HTML element. So, and then a property and a value. And it is as follows. You have your selector here outside the curly brackets, and then you put the curly brackets, and then you put the CSS property, and then you put full colon, and then the value. Any HTML element is a possible CSS selector. So any HTML element, you can put its name here as a what? As a selector. So that you pick it and then you actually define some properties that you want it to follow. So the selector is simply the element that is linked to a particular style. So for example, the selector in here that we have, the selector in this line of code is what? Is P, and P is what? Is our paragraph. And then text indent will be 3 AM. So all paragraphs in our document will be affected by this CSS property. So the selector is normally the HTML element or a tag you wish to define. So the property is the attribute you wish to change. And each property can take a value. So it can take many values, but it can have many possible values, but it will take what? A value. So the property and the value are separated by a what? By a colon and surrounded by curly braces. It's not a colon there. Yes, it's separated by this full colon. So this one will be your selector, which means you select the whole body of your HTML document, and then its color will be black. So NB, if the value consists of multiple words, put it in quotes, as in here, what you have here, maybe it's the font family, it's sans serif, so you put it in quotes. So here is the example that we have here. You can specify more than one property separated with a semicolon. So the example below shows how to define a center aligned paragraph with a red text color. You want to create a paragraph, and that paragraph, you want to style a paragraph, not create it rather. You want to style a paragraph, and the text align will be what? Will be center, and then the color will be red. So you put a semicolon in between here, and then write the next property and its value. So to make the style definitions more readable, you can describe one property on each line like this. Instead of just doing this, you can put each and every property on each line. This on its own line, and this on its own line, something like this. So you can group selectors, separating them by a comma. Maybe in case you want to make sure that all your headers have got the color green. So you can actually do it just once for all those selectors. So in the example below, we have grouped all the header elements. All header elements will be displayed in green text color. So you put H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Just put a comma between them, and then you open the curly brackets, and then you put your CSS properties and their values inside those curly brackets. So whatever you put here will affect all these CSS selected, these HTML selected elements here. So the class selector, you can use a class, you can use an ID, as well as the tag name. So with the class selector, you can define different styles for the same type of HTML element. Say that you would like to have two types of paragraphs in your document, one right aligned paragraph and one center aligned paragraph. So here is how you can do it. You can do it with the styles. You want two paragraphs with actually the other one center aligned, the other one right aligned. So you can actually use this p.right, where this right is the class in your HTML tag. I think you know a class in HTML tag. And then you can use this center. And then inside this, you can put text align center, text align right. So you can have to use the class attribute in your what? You then have to use the class attribute in your HTML document. For example, you create your paragraph with this class right, and then you create another paragraph with this class center. Then in the CSS, you pick this class selector p.center and p.right. And this line will affect this paragraph, and this line will affect this paragraph. So this is the use of what? Of the class selector. So comments are used to explain your code and may help you when you edit the source code at a later date. So those comments that you were using in C programming will also work here. So a comment will be ignored by browsers. A CSS comment begins with this one, /star, and ends with star, then /, like this. So this is a comment in a CSS, and this one is also a comment in a CSS. So inserting styles in sheets, how do you do it? So when a browser reads a style sheet, it will format the document according to it. So there are three ways of inserting a style sheet. How do you do it? You can use external style sheet, you can use internal style sheet, you can use inline styles. So there are three ways to include CSS in your HTML. in your HTML. So with external style sheet, and each of these comes with their advantages and disadvantages. So external style sheet, an external style sheet is ideal when the style is applied to many pages. If you've got the styles that you want to apply to many pages, better make it an external style sheet. With an external style sheet, you can change the look of an entire website by changing one file, because you'll be having that ability to change to affect all the web pages that you have on your website. So each page must link to the style sheet using the link tag. So you use the link tag to link the external style sheet. So the link tag goes inside the head section. In your HTML document, in the head section, you put link, then you put the relationship here, which is the style sheet, and then you put the type, which is text / style sheet. Then you use href, which is the hypertext reference. Then you put here the name of your style sheet, and you need to put the full link there that will be actually linking to that. So the real attributes is used to define the relationship between the link file and the HTML document, so that the HTML document will know that this is a style sheet. So the external browser will read the style definitions from the file mystyle.css and format the document according to it. So an external style sheet can be written in any text editor. So the file should not contain any HTML text. So in CSS, if it is an external style sheet, there will be no any HTML text there. So your style sheet should be saved with a .css extension. Any example of a style sheet file is shown below. An example of a style sheet. If it is an external style sheet, what we have will be these commands: a selector here, and then the properties for this selector. This selector and its properties, this selector and its properties. That's what you find in your external style sheet. Then on the internal style sheet, an internal style sheet should be used when a single document has a unique style. If the style is actually for that document only, then use the internal style sheet. So you define internal style sheets, internal styles in the head section by using the style tag, like this. Inside your head, inside the head section, you put this style text. You put this style text, and then you label this type, and then text / CSS. And then whenever whatever comes in here will be regarded as what? As CSS. That's where you put all the CSS. And all that CSS will only affect that web page or that web document, which you have this style tag in its header section. So the browser will now read the style definitions and format the document according to it. NB, a browser normally ignores unknown tags. So this means that any old browser that does not support styles will ignore style tag, but the content of the style tag will be displayed on the page. So it is possible to prevent an old browser from displaying the content by hiding it in the HTML comment element. You can hide it in the HTML comment there so that other old browsers that actually do not recognize the style tag can leave that. So we've got left with the inline styles. So an inline style loses many of the advantages of style sheets by mixing content with presentation. You will see that when you do inline styles, you will be mixing the styles with the HTML tags. So use this method sparingly, such as when a style is to be applied to a single occurrence of any element. To use inline styles, you use the style attribute in the relevant tag. So the style attribute can contain any CSS property. The example shows how to change the color and the left margin of the paragraph. Here, maybe you want to change the color of the paragraph and also its margin from left. You want it to be 20 pixels from left, from the element from its left, or so something like that. So on its first tag, you put style there, and then you put an equal sign, and then you put these quotes. And then inside that, you put the properties and their values. CSS properties and their values separated by what? By this colon, by this. So this is a paragraph, is the one which is going to be displayed with this color, and also it will be 20 pixels from the left. This how do you use the inline styles. So multiple style sheets, if some properties have been set for the same selector in different style sheets, the values will be inherited from the more specific style sheet. So for example, an external style sheet has these properties for the H3 selector here, and an internal style sheet has these properties for the H3 selector. If the page with the internal style sheet also links to the external sheet style sheet, the properties for H3 will be color red, which is this one, and then text align right, which is this one that we have here, and then font size 20 ppt. So the color is inherited from the external style sheet, and the text alignment and the font size is replaced by the internal style sheet. If you see it here, this text align will be here. We've got this left, but it will be replaced by the inline, and then this one will be also replaced by this one. And then this is the end on CSS. I don't know if there are questions. Are there any questions? Innocent, is that a hint?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Is it practical to use inline when you're using external?
Yeah, then there comes the issue of what exactly do you want to achieve. If you are using inline, make sure that that CSS you want to apply, you are going to apply it on that element only, because there's no use of actually applying each and every. Maybe you have got 5 paragraphs, you want them to have text with the color red. Why do you use the inline? There, since you want to apply it on all those 5 paragraphs, you can just give them the same class, right? And then after giving them the same class, then you go to the external style sheet, and then you can select, you can use that class as your selector, and then you can put the color red so that you affect all those 5 paragraphs at once. So use only inline CSS to style just a single tag, HTML tag.
My question is that can we not probably put that tag or classify the tag to say this class so that I just use the external? Will it be necessary to use the inline?
Like what? I'm not getting you correctly.
Isn't it? I can declare a class.
It's not like declare. Yeah, you can we can quite declare it declare a class, but in HTML it's not like declaring it also, but just giving a name of that class.
Oh yes, I give a name to a class. Say I've got a specific HTML element that I want affected.
Yes.
Instead of using the inline, can't I probably name it or put it a class so that I just do it in the external?
Yeah.
Instead of coming into the file and using the inline.
Yeah.
My question is that is it not possible to just use the external?
It's possible to just use the external, but here I think you need to understand that why do we need the inline? Why do we need the internal? Why do we need the external? It's just possible to use the external. It's just the way you use the internal, because you can just give each and every tag the class name, right? And then you target it using the external style sheet.
Well, now I understand.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Then Nikki.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I see a hand on you.
Yeah, I need some clarification here. I saw something like the way we define our selectors in CSS. I saw something that was a hash with the select like a hash container or a dot. What's the difference between that a dot, a hash, or something without a selector without a dot or a hash? What's the difference?
Okay, that one it comes to the selector. Your selector can be a class, can be an ID, can be a tag name. So if you see it without a dot, know that it's just an HTML element that you'll be styling. Maybe it's a P, which is for paragraph. And then you see a dot, know that you are using class to select that HTML element. And then if you see a hash, know that you're using an ID to pick an HTML element. So a hash is for an ID, and then a dot is for a class.
Okay, so thank you very much.
You are welcome. I don't know if there are other questions before we proceed. If there are no questions, let me take my last slide before we do a practice on HTML forms. So let me check my last slide here, and I've shared. Now I want to link the PHP and the MySQL. you want to link those two. So let me share this. I think now you have something on your screen. So let's talk about PHP and MySQL. How do they interact? So let me add someone here. I think this part is also very important in your exams because it actually comes with a lot of marks there. So PHP and MySQL interact with each other through PHP and MySQL extensions. So we connect to MySQL through PHP using PHP's MySQL related extensions. There are two types of such extensions for PHP 5.50. If you're using PHP 5.50, though even now, I think now we are at PHP 9 point something or so. So if you are using PHP 5.50 and higher or later versions since 2012, you use MySQL I, which is the I here stands for improved, and the PDO, which is the PHP data objects. You can use any of the two. Can use any of the two. So now the question is, which should I use, MySQL I or PDO? You are free to use whatever you like here. Anything that you want, you can use. But as for me, or as for this module, it is rather good to use MySQL I. However, you may use PDO when multiple database support is needed, since PDO offers support for many databases, not only MySQL. So if you're actually dealing with MySQL, just better to use this MySQL I. But if you want to use, if your system or the web browser that you are, or the web page that you are designing, or the website that you are designing actually use multiple databases, better use the PDO, which is the PHP data objects. So let's talk about the MySQL database creation. I think you all know this from the other courses. I think you've actually done MySQL, right? Have you done MySQL?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for this. So I think everyone knows how to create a database, blah, blah, blah. So before we can interact with a database, it should have been created. So first, you have to create the database. So a MySQL database can be created either through the PHP MyAdmin interface, for example, in WAMP server. If you use WAMP server, excuse me, or XAMPP server, you can use terminal interface in Linux to access the MySQL server, or using the PHP code. You can actually use the PHP code to create the database, or you can actually create the database manual and then you link the database using the PHP. So with PHP MyAdmin, we manually design and manipulate the database, while code is automatically created on the background. So you may need to familiarize yourself with this MySQL environment before you concentrate much on database manipulation from PHP. So before we talk about PHP, you need MySQL, and I'm sure everyone have done MySQL part. So we can design and manipulate a database using the structured query language, which is the SQL. So the SQL statements can be executed in PHP. To create a database, you need to first make a connection to the MySQL server. So if you want your web page to actually interact with the MySQL, first you need to create the connection to the MySQL server before you even create the database, or even you select the database, or even you do any query. You first need the connection. So a connection to MySQL is opened using the MySQL connect function. So this one This function is the one that you use for connecting to the MySQL server. So the function takes 3 arguments, which is the server name, username, and the password. It takes all those 3 things. And if you have not changed the configurations to the .ini file, which is the PHP configuration file, during PHP and MySQL installation, the default user is root and with no password. So the default details for login to MySQL server is root and with no password. So it is advisable to change these settings for security reasons. Maybe you want to put it in production mode or so. Maybe you want to host it or so. So better change this user and password there. So let's talk about how do you create a MySQL database using PHP, and then you connect to it. So if you see here, I've got this these 3 variables, variable declaration. These tags here is just to say that the code follows in between here is what is PHP. And here if we see that we've got this variable for the server name and also for the username and for the password. So first you need to create a connection so that you can do a query or so. So how do you create a connection? You use MySQL I connect function, this function here. You can use this function. So that function you take the server name, the password, the username, and the password. And here you are saving this connection in this variable that we are saying $connect or so something like that. If you want to check that the connection is successfully done or so, or actually failed, right? You can use if not connection or so, then die connection failed, then you print the error. Was it will return an error, it failed to connect. Otherwise, the connection is successful. Here you can put an else for that the connection is what is successful. Also, you can later on create what the database, right? This is an SQL query to create a database. You can just run the command create a database, and then my database, my DB will be what will be your database. I think you know this command, and then you can save it in here. It's like it's a query builder, right? You can save it in this variable, and then you can put that query inside this function. You can pass it inside this function, MySQL I query. What does it do? It will take the connection to the MySQL server, and then it will take a query. So this connection is from here. So it will connect to what? To this server, and then it will use this username and password to log in, and then it will do a query to create a database. So once it runs that, we can say that the database created successful. Otherwise, we can echo out an error there. Can echo out an error. And after a connection to MySQL database, if you've done your manipulation, then later you need to close that connection. You can close that connection. So this is just the process of creating a database using PHP. We have actually linked the PHP and the MySQL. It managed to do a query of creating a database. So if you are being asked to actually query some information from database and then do something or manipulate that information, what you need first is the connection to the database. And then after that, you use your knowledge from the MySQL database, and then you do the queries And then after that, we can now use the PHP to manipulate that data. So if our server is on the same machine we are using to connect, like that server is on your local machine, then we use localhost or the IP address 127.0.0.1, which is a loopback address used by a machine to address itself internal. So otherwise we have to specify the database host server here if it is not on your machine. So it is also important to check for errors during connection and guide users accordingly. If there is an error, then you need to do something. Maybe you need to try a connection, or you need actually to stop the whole process. So queries are executed by the MySQL query function. So you can do your query builder and then later you pass it in here. So the function takes two arguments, which is a link or a connection to the MySQL server and the string for the query to be executed, or just its variable. So hello. Oh, sorry. Is it like that to others? Let me
Yes,
that is.
let me reshare. Is it now big?
Yes, sir, it's back now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
So
it's back.
okay, thank you. So I was saying queries are executed by this MySQL query function. So the function takes two arguments, a link or connection to the MySQL server, and the string for the query to be executed, or just its variable. So example one that we've done is a procedural way of creating the database. Those who are more experienced with the object-oriented programming can use the object-oriented way, as in example 2. Here we've got this example 2 that we have here. It just does the same like what we have actually done back, but instead of using something that we have actually used here back in example 1, you can use this pointer operator that you use in PHP, and then it will be actually much simpler and much readable. Then you come here and then you use the connection. So what you do first is to do this connection, server name localhost, then root password nothing. Can you make sure that we are all on mute? And then after that, you create your connection. First, you create your connection, new MySQL. Then after that, you use the connection to check for an error. If there is an error, that's connection then pointing to the connect error, then you print the error. Else, it have been not successfully connected. Then for creating the database, you build your query, and then you just use your connection with the query function here, and then you pass your SQL query in here, and then if it is equal to true, you use this triple equal sign. Then if it is equal to true, then we know that the database is actually created. Else, you can echo out the error. So this, after that, you close your connection. So this is just the process of connecting to the database using PHP. So when a database is already created, we can connect to it using the MySQL connect function with the 4 arguments. So if your database is not there, you use this with 3 arguments, and then you create the database and then later connect to that database. Otherwise, you actually create the connection with 4 arguments, and the 4th one will be the actual database. So apart from opening a connection to MySQL server, the additional argument specifies the database we need to connect it to. So you put your server name, your username, your password, as well as the database. This database will be my database that we've actually created. And then on creating connection, you put 4 arguments: your server name, your username, your password, and the database here, which is this variable that we are passing here. This one is a $, it's not an S. So after that, you can check for what? For a connection. If there is an error, you say there's an error. If there is no error, we know that we've actually successfully connected. So the connection is established. The connection will be established to that database. In other words, you have actually already selected the database that you are going to work with. Next, you can query information from that database, from any specific table from that database. So this will be the process to connecting to the database. Rather than creating the database, you connect to MySQL, but connecting directly to the database. So here we do this, the last slide. So the procedural way of making a connection, this one, and then you put your database there, and then you use the new MySQL, and then your connection will be straight to the database. And then, then after that, you close your connection. I don't know if there are questions here. Are there questions on linking your PHP Abisha?
I wanted to ask, on connecting the database, when I mention I put it die and on the others return echo, do they have the same function? Echo, print, and die?
Yes, I think it's just what you'll be using here. If you are using die there, where is it here? You'll be actually,
yes.
It's a function in PHP. It's just a function in PHP that you'll be using to print the error, and then you close the query just at that moment after using this function. And then you can also just echo out. We know that if there is an error here, you can also just echo out that there is an error rather than to use this die function. I think that's a little bit different there, but it's just the same. With this die, you can actually just close that query at that moment after printing that error. I don't know if you actually get it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Don't know if there are other questions. If there are no other questions, I think I can just now create a symbol. Just want to create a simple web page that we can connect to our PHP, that we can connect to our database. So now I'm free to share my screen here. Now I'm starting my sample. I don't know you guys if you have installed a local server on your PC. For me, let me share the whole screen. I think you see that I've got this server. I started this server here. And I started I started the Apache server and the MySQL database. That's all what I need here. And then from there, since I'm using XAMPP, I go into my local disk C and then go to the XAMPP file at the XAMPP folder. And then inside the XAMPP folder, there is the htdocs file. That's where I have to put all my web projects there so that I can just run them from the web browser. Without doing that, you are not going to be able to run the PHP code there. So I'm just unsharing my screen, then I'll go to my folder, some folder, and then I'll create the project there. I'll just create the project htdocs file. I'll just create a project, a new folder. I'll name it just forms. I'll just name it forms. I just name it forms. So I don't know the text editors that you use, guys, but let me share the text editor that I'm using. For me, I'm using the VS Code. I'm using the VS Code. So I want to just share this window. I think we are seeing this VS Code. So I've created my project, and then I'm just going to open that folder inside this local disk inside XAMPP, and then I'll go on to the htdocs file. Inside this, there is this folder called forms. So it's an empty folder. I'm just going to create the new file here. I'm going to name it. I'm just going to name it index dot php. Right? Then I'll create the file. So I call it index just because whenever I just enter the URL for my web project, the server will actually look for the index file, which will be the one which will be starting the whole project. So it's good to have the index page in your project, because this will be the page that will be referenced by the server. And then here I have to put what? Whenever I want to put the PHP code, I will just put this text, right? But first, let's put the HTML text there, and then there is the head part, and then there is the body part. There is the body part here. So inside the head part, that's where you can put your title, right? That's where you can put your title. I can say HTML forms, right? And then you can just put a simple paragraph in here. Just say HTML forms. And just want to see that if you have managed to do it well. I'm just finding my browser. So on my browser, I want to share my browser there. If I just write localhost instead of all these things, I will have to put forms, right? If I do this, you see that I've got this paragraph which says HTML forms. Maybe let me put it as a header rather than a paragraph. Let me put H1 so that it will be actually big. Let me put H1 there. If I refresh it, you see that we have this HTML forms. So without writing the index.php file here, it will automatically run the index.php file. So that's why we need that index.php file. It will be like your home, right? So after this, what do I need? I need to create a form. I need to create a what? A form. And in that form, I'll put some HTML elements there. So for time, or let me unshare this and share my code editor. Yes, so I need a form here. So on issue of form submission, so I think there's the part that we've actually jumped. Before I came here, let's just, I think it's a 3-minute slide that actually tells us how do we post forms. It's just a 5-slide, doesn't take long. Let me just share it so that I do not need to explain much when we are coding. I think it's good for us to go through it. It's just 5 slides. Like when you are posting HTML elements, you want to post them so that we can process them. Maybe there are users who want to register on our platform or in our web page. They can actually register and post their data to the server, and then we can save them to the database, or we can do whatever we want with that data. So let me pick a highlighter here and the green one. So the form when submitted is when it's submitted is posted to the web server as form data. So there are 2 methods, excuse me, for posting this data: the post method and the get method. So post data is encoded the same way as get data, which means in terms of security and insecurity, they are almost like the same, but isn't it typically visible to the users in a standard process like get data. So the post data, its data will be not visible, but the get data, its data will be visible. Visible to who? So the get data is appended to the URL. So it will be appended to the URL. On that, where you actually type the URL, that's where the get data will be actually appended. So it will be visible. So most forms use the post method because it hides the data from that way. It hides the data, the form data, away from the user, and it doesn't clutter up the URL in the address bar. So post values are unlimited in length. Post values are unlimited in length, and thus are very well suited for forms, especially forms with a lot of fields. So for forms with a lot of fields, you normally need the post because it actually takes unlimited length. Also, in terms of security, it doesn't append the data on your URL. So using the get method in a PHP form, get data comes from the URL itself, and you typically follow the name of the script file in the URL. So the the start of get data is indicated with a question mark on your URL. When you see the question mark, then followed by the name of the field is followed by an equal sign and the value of the field. Each field is then separated by the ampersand operator this end. So an example of a URL with get data for first and last name will be as follows. If you use actually the get on your post on posting the form, on your URL, you get this URL, and then after this question mark, it will start to append the form elements, like the first name and then its value, last name and its value. So it will be just visible as that on your URL. So another factor with the get is that the value of a get field cannot exceed 100 characters. You see, the field cannot exceed 100 characters if you are using get. I think it is just because you'll be using the URL there, so you have the limited characters. So we with get, an input can consist of just a URL link instead of a full-fledged form. So get data also makes it easier for a user to bookmark a certain page of data. And then how to access the data that comes with the post or with the get method. So post data is accessed with the post array in a PHP. So we use this global variable with the $post array. We use this array if you use post to post your data. For example, if we have a form with 2 text boxes for the first name and the last name are submitted using the post method as follows. For my name, name of that form is this form, and then on action, that's where you specify the page which is going to handle that data, or the page which is going to receive that that data at the server side. So there will be a file called the PHP file called my form1, and then the method, that's where you specify the method get or post, but here you are using post. So you have got this these elements, the paragraph with first name, and then inside that paragraph we've got the input which have got the name as first name and the name as last name. So we have got another input which is the submit button. So whenever we click this button, we'll be submit the form. That form is submitted to this PHP handler, which is my form1.php. And then how do we access this data of the first name and the last name? So in PHP, you use this array, and then in this array, you pass the field name of this first name of this input or of this input. So by that, you can actually echo out the first name of that person. Also, you can do that for the last name. And then for the get, how to access the get data. If you use get on your method. So get data is accessed in the same way that post data is in PHP, except with the get array instead of of the post array in PHP. So for example, if we have used a get method in our previous form with the 2 text boxes for the first name and last name, we can access data as follows. If you have actually used that code, you can use this get, then you put first name, and then get, you can put last name there. So you can also use the isSet function to check if you have actually submitted the form, so that we can later on read those fields instead of just putting your unprotected code. Like if we just run that file without submitting something, there will be some errors there. So you need to make sure that you check that a user actually clicked submit. So we can use the isSet function on any variable to determine if it has been set or not. So the function can be used on the post array to determine if the variable was posted or not. This is often applied to the submit button value, but can be applied to any other variable. So you see, normally we use it for the button, for the submit button, to check if the submit button is set. For example, using our form in the previous slide, you can check that is submit set. If submit is set, we know that the user actually entered the values. You can even use the validation there, but actually we know that the user actually clicked the submit button by checking if it is set. So then after we know that the user actually submitted the form, we can print the first name and the last name there. So we only display the submitted values if the submit button was clicked. If it was not clicked, we are not going to display all these things. So here, this is the end of this slide of how do we post the form data. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? There is a hand. Is there any hand? No, I do not have any hand here. Can we make sure that we switch off all our cameras as well as all our mic? So if there are no questions, let me just do that demo with you, and then it will be the end of this slide. Okay, let me reshare here. I was about to create my form. I'm sure you are seeing my text editor here. So I'm going to put the file which is going to handle, or which is going to handle this code, this form, right? The file that we are going to, which is going to get our code, right? So I'm going to use handler.php as the file which is going to handle our code. But as you see here, we do not have that file. So I need to create that file. I need to create a new file, which is handler.php, so that whenever I run this code, whenever I submit this form, it will be submitted to this file, and then that's where we are going to have the PHP code there. So which method are we going to use? So I need to put the method there. Which method am I going to use? I'm going to use the post. Let me just put post method there. I'm going to use the post. Then in here, for the sake of time, let me see, where can I get the elements? Maybe from our slide. Just want to put the elements on our form. Let me see. Okay, I have these elements. For the sake of time, let me just put these elements, right? I've got this input box, which will be taking the first name. So here is just a label which will be saying first name, and then the input box in front of it, and then another label for last name. Here it's for breaking break line, so that you can skip a line. We are skipping 2 lines, then you put another label, last name, and then I'll put another input which will be taking the text, and then I'll put the submit button. We'll be submitting our form to this file. So if I came to my browser, think I need to share my browser so that if I refresh this browser, you see that I have these two fields for putting my first name and my last name. This is the form that we have created. And then if I click this submit, you see that it will go to the handler.php file. This is the file which will be actually handling our code. Maybe you want to do something, maybe you want to store that code into our database, those values into our database, or want to do something with those values. That's where we put that code in this PHP file. But before that, we need to create our database. We need to create the database that we'll be actually connecting to. So I need to go to the PHP my admin. Let me go to PHP my admin there. Since I've already started my server, in PHP my admin in my database, let me create a new database. Let me just give it let me just name it form. Then I'll create the database, and then that database I want to create a table. Let me give it user. I just want 2 columns. Just 2 columns, maybe for first name, F name, and for last name. Let me just give it L name. Then you can just put text for first name and then text for the second name. Then I can just put that for the length of those characters, and then I can save this table. Now I have this table inside the form database. So I've actually created the database. Then we want to connect to that database in this handler.php file. After connect to that database, we want to store the values from the form, right? So what do we need here? I think I have to unshare that, and then I will share and then I will share my let me share this file. So what do we want here? We want to put the PHP tags, and then let me put the PHP tags don't I have them PHP tags? Okay, I was just checking for the shortcuts. PHP, then I'll close this. Everything that comes in here is what is PHP. So what do you want? We've actually said to connect to the database with the connect function. We need 4 arguments: the server name, the password, the user, and then the database itself. So I can create those variables to save time. Let me see if I can have them from the slide that we're actually using. So these are the variables that we need on my database. The server name will be localhost or 127.0.0.1. And then the username is root. The password, there is no password there. And then what do we need is the database name. So let's create a variable for database. For our database, which will be equal to, we have created the database called form, right? So here, that's what we need. So we can say it's a database, it's fine. You can just call it even database name or just database. After that, what do we need now? We need to connect to database. We now need to connect to database using the what? The connect function. And that connect function, how do we create it? To take we can say we can create a variable just connect or just say con, which will be equal to new. We create the new MySQL connection, right? MySQL connection. So using this method, we can take 4 arguments. And what are these arguments? These are just the server name, the username, the password, and the database name. So you can put the server name, you can put the user name, you can put the password as well as the database name. By just doing this, you have connected to the database. What you need now is just to check if there is an error or there is no an error. And for doing that, we can actually use, let me just copy the code just to save time. The code from the slide that we were using. Can just use this connection variable, and then you will check if there is any error. If there is an error, we say that connection failed just because of this error. It will tell us the error, and then else the we have actually connected successfully. Then from there, what do we need? So let's just check for the connection of database on our browser. Okay, I didn't share that. I think you have actually seen that way. After refreshing my web page, I got this message: connected successfully. We've managed to actually connect it to the database. What we need now is to insert the information to the database, which is actually what we have been doing on our slides. So let me share my IDE, my text editor. Right, what we need now is to insert that data. So for inserting that data, you can first initialize the variables, or you can first take that data from the get or from the post array, then put it in your variables, and then later insert it into the database, right? So first we need to create those variables for taking the first name and the last name, right? So I can just say first name, which will be equal to $post, right? We want to use the post method, and then here we need to pass the name of this text input. If you come here, the first name, its name is what? It's F name. So we need this. This is thing that we are going to put here, and then we do the same for the last name. I'm sorry, I do like to copy and paste. So after this, we have our values in these 2 variables, and then what do we need is to create a query and then pass that query to the database. So we are going to create a query using insert into. Then we'll put the table, like here. I can create a variable SQL, where we are going to initially install our query, and then later after store that query, we can later use the query function to query that. So we can use insert, this insert, sorry, just wanted to use the shortcut there. insert into, want to set into our table, what do we call it? Users. I think we've called it users, and then you want to put the columns where you want to. What were the columns there? It was F name and last name, and then after that, what are the values that we are going to pass to this query? Then we need to put values there, and in these values we need also to pass the actual values, and these values will be actually coming from the variables. So we need just to pass the variables that we have actually created there. So to pass these variables, we need to put the single quotes for MySQL. I think you know the SQL. So I'll put the first name variable and the last name variable. I think we were done with the preparing our query. What we need now is just to run the query. It's just to run the query. How do we run the query? We use the query. We use the query function. We just use the query function, and here we pass our actual query, SQL. After doing this query will run, but I didn't capture any error here. You don't need to do this, team. Next, you need to use is set function so that we check is the user clicked the submit button. After checking that, then you can do this. Also, we need to check if there is an error. If there is an error, I'll add that later. But let's see what we are going to get after running this form. So I'm going to share the browser. Let me share the browser part. Right. So I'm going to refresh this form. I'm going to put let me just put Ezekiel, then Chimana here. If I submit, it is saying that uncaught error code to undefined function query in C# on line 19. There is an error there on the function query that I coded there. What's wrong about that query? Okay, I didn't put the connection. Sorry, we need the connection there. I think it's the issue of connection. Here you need the connection so that this query will be actually being directed to the database. So you need this connection that we have actually created
the
here.
code, sir. Kindly
Hello?
share the code. Kindly
Oh,
share the code. We are
okay.
only seeing the browser.
Okay, so we need the connection here. I didn't put the connection so that the query will be actually directed to this database or to this connection to the server actually. So I didn't connect to the server. We have connected, but I didn't use that connection here. So I have to use that connection. So I'll put this thing here. You have to fix all our things. So you need to use your connection to the query, your connection, yes, to this query, and then everything will be done there. So let me share the browser and see what we have there. If I refresh this, I'll put everything there, then I'll submit. What's another one? What's another error? Forms users doesn't exist. Okay, what's the table that we have created here? I think it's the issue of, okay, it's user, not users. It's user, not users. So when I said insert into users, it's insert into user, not users. So on that, if I do this and this, then you see that there is the created successfully here and no other error. So if I browse this, you see that we've got this data here, Ezekiel Chman, in our database. So we've managed to create a code that you insert the data into the database. So you can do the same. You can query that data. You can also display that data. You can modify that data using PHP. So those are the tasks that you can do on your own. But this is the basic. This is how you can connect to MySQL and actually insert data into the database. To query that data, you need to know the query that you are going to use. You'll be using the select instead of insert into. And then after selecting that information, you can use a while loop to loop through all the fields that you have collected from the database. So I think I can take questions if there are questions. Are there any questions? Yes, Innocent.
Yes, can we have the slides, the presentation?
You need the slides.
Yes.
Okay, I can share with you. I think, are you in the group?
I'm not even, I don't even know that there's a group.
There is a group that was created, but I think it's just a week ago. It was created just a week ago. So better if I can upload them on your portal. But it needs time. Maybe just to share them on our group. Better if you can have my number so that I can add you in that group. Okay, what I will do is very simple. I'll just put the group on your portal. Was just putting one link and just for all. And then if you join that group, you can ask for those slides. I will send or other people will resend.